With Sacramento in crisis mode and the legislative session winding down, are we going to see some direct impact on firearm legislation in 2025? Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel today. As usual, we are continuing to see some kooky behavior up in Sacramento. To talk us through that today, we have brought back the legislative director of CRPA. You can also find him on AM 590 The Answer. That is the Firing Line radio show every Saturday at 1 p.m. That, of course, is Rick Travis. Rick, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, before we get into this one today, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to these videos. It really helps with the algorithms to get this information out there. And at the end of the day, that information is the knowledge, which is the power that can continue this cultural slide that we are on to preserve the Second Amendment. So Rick, let's just kind of jump right into this. You know, we've been talking for a while with you specifically about how we've gotten ourselves into a budget deficit, what that might look like as far as the legislature is concerned. Having to put some safeguards up for themselves might mean there could be some effects on firearms legislation in particular. And that's all before these fires started down here in LA. We're seeing billions of dollars in damage. So I'm just kind of curious, you know, with a lot of these gut and amend bills, we're not necessarily seeing a whole lot of pointed legislation, at least specifically for firearms. Is there a cause and effect here that you're seeing in Sacramento as far as the budget is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, of course, is pontificating, but I mean, there's some really glaring, obvious things going on. I mean, one is the past couple of days, we haven't seen a whole lot of movement in the Capitol on any kind of legislation. The reason is because the governor has basically said, hey, can we just apply the brakes? And of course, the Speaker of the Senate and the Assembly have agreed with him on that. And those brakes are allegedly, and I say that in air quotes, to be able to go and help the good people in these ravaged areas. And they have framed it as they're there for the rescue. Well, let's be really clear. There are many in the Capitol and throughout the state that are like, you mean you're there to rescue them from the failed policies that you've been maintaining? The governor has been very quick to go after anybody that would suggest that any of his policies have failed. But, you know, facts are facts. Facts are that this government has said for years it would clean out, you know, hundreds of thousands of acres of dead wood that have been building up for the past decade and only managed to do about 20% of what they claimed they were going to do, which is part of the reason. If you talk to anybody in the fire community that has been working on this fire, they will tell you there was a lot of fuel that had been left in the field that caused these fires to ravage things. You know, this isn't the first time we've had fires in California, Kevin. And when I worked years ago for another member of the legislature, we had terrible fires in San Juan Capistrano, you know, Laguna Beach. It was really bad in the 90s. And we did a drive to give people food, clothing, the things that you lose when your entire house burns and all there's left are nails in the ground. They're melted, which was the case in San Juan Capistrano. And, you know, one of the things I think was remarkable is all the money that got donated. I mean, we worked with radio stations, TV stations, everything like you always do. None of that money was pushed through any accounts that we had any control over. It went to the actual agencies, the nonprofits that were working to provide relief. Yet the governor is out there this very day, you know, trying to raise money. But I think it should be noted that it's like almost 4% of all the donations are going to a super PAC that he works with. So like he's laundering the donations to make money. So again, is his focus really 100% on Californians, or is he like, hey, here's another way for me to raise funds? Because when you're 4% is a lot when you're talking millions of dollars in relief for a issue that is well over $250 billion in damages. I mean, the fires have done like 3 times the size of Manhattan in damage. I mean, this isn't a small issue. As you and everybody else listening to this video remembers, a very small part of Manhattan got hit on 9/11. And we can all remember the damage and how long that took to recover that really small area. This fire has already taken out 3 times the entire island of Manhattan.
Well, certainly, there are consequences to your actions or inactions, and we've kind of seen a lot of that in California. Aside from the firearms debate, just as far as promises that have been made but not been kept, it's almost like you have a bullet train situation, but then you also have 30 smaller bullet train situations where the promises just aren't met. As far as consequences are concerned, though, I'm curious, what are your thoughts? I'm not exactly seeing any sort of extension to the legislature. So, the session is still going to end when it's going to end. Whether or not we have legislation that we can start advocating against right now is different than, waiting for these gut and amend bills to come to fruition. So, what are your thoughts on basically a shorter legislative session? If we're not seeing them now, we'll probably see those bills later, which means we would have less time to advocate against them.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that we're seeing, and I think this is very scary for Californians, and a lot of the time we're talking primarily about conservation bills, Second Amendment bills, things that are in our wheelhouse. But I don't want Californians and the people that watch this program to take their eyes off the ball. These got an amend bills like Assemblyman Gabriel has several of them. They all have the same title. They all say the same thing, and they can be gutted and amended to handle anything. Now, on one hand, that would allow the assembly member to be able to address any issues that came up, say on the fires. He doesn't have to go and draft, he just moves. But here's why they're dangerous. Those bills, because they have nothing in them, will kind of float through the assembly and then could very easily make it into the Senate because they really have no impact at this point. So they already went through one house where they could have been stopped in committees, there could have been negotiations, but nobody's going to waste time on, well, it doesn't do anything. But now it's in the Senate. And now he fleshes it out that it's a water bill, or it's a reservoir bill, or it's an anti-Second Amendment bill, or an anti-hunting bill, whatever that may be, anti-healthcare, pro-healthcare. It doesn't give whoever the parties are involved a chance to mount support or to be proactively against it because it happens. And then what that also does is it breeds within the electorate of, well, why weren't people like you, Rick, telling us about this early on? Well, I am. I'm telling you early on, like, hey, there's like 30 targeted bills that could be gun amended from one member alone. But we don't know where they're going to go. So are all 30 coming our direction? No, not even. But could some of them? Yeah. And could those be damning? Well, just remember, it was Gabriel that gave us the 11% excise tax. So, yeah, we should be watching anything this individual does. But he's not the only one playing this game.
Well, that's actually kind of an interesting proposition. So, and maybe you can give me a little lesson here in the process of government because we do have the Assembly and the Senate. I mean, it's a similar structure with the federal government as far as Congress is concerned. But that process by which bills are passed is there for a reason to get the representation of the people in California. If you're telling me that a bill can get passed through the Assembly as a gut and amend bill that doesn't really say anything and then gets flushed out in the Senate, just as a matter of process, does it have to go back since it has new language to the Assembly to get passed there? Or have they basically bypassed half of the legislative process with a bill to get it to sneak it through in the Senate?
So there is a technicality. So to answer the first part of your question, yes, it has to go back for what's called congruence. Generally, how that happens, though, Kevin, is very late in July, mid-August. It's at a time when people like myself are not allowed to make any comments. And generally speaking, there's like hundreds of bills that are handled in one day on that congruence. And it's like, anybody have any issues on the following? And then you get to hear an auctioneer rattle off a bunch of bills. Seeing none, moved. And then they go straight to the final vote. And then they go to the governor's office. The problem is we have seen this over and over. I mean, famous events in our community like Gunmageddon back during the Brown administration with Kevin De Leon. We watched multiple gun amendments be gun amended on one night and voted into the very next day and signed by the governor. So like when they want to move quick with the gun amendment, they can do it in less than 48 hours. If they want to stall and play games, they can do that for an entire session or two. So that's the challenge that we all face with gun amendments. And Yeah, that's why, since I've been in this position, I always tell our legislative teams like, hey, here's the number of gun and men's that are still alive and viable. And so if anything comes up, that's how they're able to move so quick. But they've also been used as weapons, and that's a concern.
Well, speaking of rule slights, maybe you can put this one into perspective for me. We kind of boasted, or at least talked about the fact that there were some rule changes in the legislature for the 2-year session, how the number of bills that any elected official would be able to create and put down, that number decreased. Yet now, as the session is continuing to unfold, we're seeing hundreds of bills being put down by individual legislators. How exactly does this happen? Are we just throwing the rules out the window at this point? And if that's the case, why create them at all?
Okay, so there was a lot in that. Okay, so I'll try to handle most of that. I think that to their credit, both Senator McGuire and his counterpart in the Assembly, um, Mr. Rivas, Assemblymember Rivas, both have very, very good intent in saying, hey, we're going to slow things down. We're going to go this 35 bill rule. However, this is a legislature that doesn't like rules to apply to them. They love them to apply to other people, but not to them. And so they get creative. And here's the problem with bureaucracies. Bureaucracies, you can always find a way. You can find a way to stop somebody, and you can find a way around something. And so, in the case of Assemblymember Gabriel, he is in charge of the Budget Committee. And so, what he do? He put forward, oh, these aren't my bills. I'll have my 35 bills. These are committee bills. And so he's got a bunch of Budget Act of 2025 bills that are all identical. They're clearly got an amendable, but he's called them committee bills. And his name's on them. He's the author of them. He controls them in the end, but they're just committee bills. Yeah, but he's got like over 100 of them. So, there's game playing. Now, him and his office right now would probably deny there's any game playing on, but anybody who's been around the Capitol realizes if it has the potential to be misused, it most likely will be.
Sure. I guess that leads to final thoughts. I mean, it seems like we have pressure coming from both the positive and the negative ends of the spectrum here. I guess when thinking about firearms legislation in particular, you would think that it would be really tough for them to create programs to infringe on our Second Amendment rights when there's no money in the budget. Yet we're also looking at a potentially smaller window if they do create legislation to advocate against it. I know it's still early, but I always love the opinion, especially when you're living this every day. What's your outlook on the year so far, the way things are shaping up?
Well, I think you're going to see a lot more joint work between the states and the federal government, especially with the inauguration just around the corner, Kevin. And I think one of the things you're already seeing, the House of Representatives has a National Reciprocity Act bill that has been fleshed out and released. The Senate came out with their own bill. That doesn't mean I mean, there is two bills, but usually what happens is as those move through the respective houses, they merge together and become one bill that goes to a president's desk. We already have been told by both Trump and Vance that they're looking forward to the day that gets signed and put into law. So Vance can't wait till it comes to a vote and he can lead that vote and be the tiebreaker if necessary, which I doubt it would be, but he's willing and prepared to do that. The president's willing to sign it. And that comes back to California. We can't figure out how to fill reservoirs, make sure fire hydrants work, have enough equipment. We know that we have, like I said, over $250 billion in damage. You also have to realize that our budget is not going to be what they projected it to be because all those people that have been displaced out of their homes will not be paying taxes in April. So that money that was coming into our state budget no longer exists. It's gone. And that is billions of dollars in tax revenues. So, the budget has been announced, but we have to wait till June, into that June deadline that you and I work with, Kevin, to see what the real numbers are. I'm going to tell you, it's no way it's going to be balanced. All of us know that. I mean, don't have to be a mathematician to figure this out. The other part of I think what you're going to see is as things like national reciprocity get pushed, there are a lot of opportunities to move forward. And one of the biggest ones I want to close this with is I'm watching there, a lot of the area was deep blue that got hit by these tragic, horrible fires. And as a member of a family that we lost our house when I was young and lost everything in it, and fire doesn't recognize politics, and so it does change your life forever. You look at things much differently if you've ever went through this kind of a disaster. And there's other disasters that have the equivalent of fire that just rob you of everything. You have a lot of people that are coming to truth. And the truth is, government is responsible for infrastructure, but you have to be responsible for your own personal safety, your food, what you're going to do in emergencies. And a lot of people who thought government could take care of them have learned over the past 7 days that's a fallacy. And so you have a lot of people in the Pacific Palisades, Malibu, Altadena, Pasadena that weren't real big on self-protection before. That Kevin, they are now showing up to politicians, members of our assembly, members of our Congress that are very blue and saying, if you want to stay in office, I need to be able to protect myself. I need to be able to store water for emergencies. I need to be able to do all these things that they've been told no for so long. And so sometimes people get upset and then they get over it and they go back to their normal. And a lot of our people in our side of political thinking will go, yeah, that's not going to last, Rick. Here's what I will tell you as a survivor of a fire. You never forget. There are painful memories all the time. I mean, for me, it's well, 3 decades in the past, but I still have people like, hey, don't you have a picture of you like in, this grade level? No, that burned in a fire. Don't you have this award from? Nope, that burned in a fire. Don't you have some of your grant? Nope, that burned in a fire. Like that's constant. And so it's not as easy to forget policies that were connected to a tragedy like that as it would be like, yeah, I had a car accident because somebody hit me and we're a month down the road and, you know, let it go. You don't let this stuff go real quick. And when you see the devastation on the ground, you don't let it go real quick. So I think that is going to have a impact in ways that a lot of people don't understand in the general electorate yet. But I think California today is less blue and a lot more purple than it was even 2 weeks ago.
Well, yeah, and I guess to extremely generalize that point, we've been talking, for a long time about how the government needs to be held accountable for their actions, and it seems like things like this are real eye openers that kind of point back to the government and say, "Hey, you said that you were going to protect us. You didn't protect us, yet we still gave you all this tax revenue and all of this." And we gave up things because you said you were going to protect us. So you are now held accountable. And like we said all last year, the best way to hold them accountable is to elect somebody who will better represent you. So, well, Rick,
I have a comment on that, Kevin.
sure.
To your point, one of the things that you and I've had to wrestle with in the grassroots and elections area is the media, mainstream media. I mean, we've said it at least 100 times in videos like this. And, in the news, print media, arguably the two big powerhouses are the San Francisco Chronicle in the north and the LA Times in the south. There are other major papers, and if you work for them, I'm not putting them down, but those are like the two big voices, the two big dogs. The LA Times, after this fire has happened, literally came out today and yesterday and said, when we endorsed Karen Bass for mayor, we were wrong. We don't have that confidence in her. She's incapable. She's not, their words, not competent for the job, and said from now on, we're going to judge people not on their political party, but on their competence. How well can they manage a budget, manage people, take care of the person on the streets? Because that's what the American people demand. That is a huge shift, Kevin, to have a major blue paper go, A, we made a mistake. B, admit that mistake. C, set a new standard. And D said, we're not going to hold people's feet to the fire and we don't care who they are. That, I think, when you're looking at what's going to come down during this session, which is a 2-year session, is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and hopefully, ideas like that continue to last far beyond this 2-year session and into the future. Well, Rick, I really appreciate the time. I know that you're a busy guy. I appreciate the insight into the legislature, and thanks for coming on with us again.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. And guys, if you like content like this, you want to see more videos, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to these videos. It's a great way for you to participate in the Second Amendment cultural shift that we have going on, and it's a great way for you to directly contribute to the legislative and litigative efforts that happen in this state for our Second Amendment. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.